r/Nosleep, posted by you hyperobscura. Our story is called 6 Deaths, 6 Funerals, 6less Death. You can't escape it. You know the word intimately. You've known it since you were old enough to think, old enough to imagine loss. But the true meaning will elude you until you've witnessed it firsthand. Until you've known grief so strong it threatens to destroy you. To destroy everyone around you. To dismantle everything you are, leaving you a soulless, hollow husk. If you've been there, to that place of anguished sorrow, like I have, then you'll know why I did the things I did. Understand the choices I made. You will come to realize that you would have done them too. Without hesitation. Without regret. And, if you had to, you would do them all over again. May 14, 2002. R.I.P. Grandpa Miles. My grandfather, or just Grandpa Miles, was the kindest, gentlest man I knew. He taught me how to fish, how to make a fire, how to respect people, not because they demanded it, but because they deserved it. I was 7 years old when he fell off the roof, hitting the rocky ground face first. They told me his neck snapped instantly on impact, so at least he wasn't in any pain. But they weren't there. They didn't hear him wheezing, lungs struggling to filter out the excess blood. They didn't see the desperation in his gaze as life slowly slipped away from him. But I did. I found him. I was there when he died. December 22, 2004. R.I.P. Auntie J. Auntie Joanne slipped on the ice. I could have held on to her, but I wasn't strong enough. I remember her beautiful blonde hair disappearing underneath the trailer, and then the unmistakable sound of a body being crushed under unimaginable pressure, followed then by her body sort of bouncing down the street, the trail of blood so vividly contrasted in the sparkling snow. The crowd gathered so fast. Piercing screams permeating the air. But I couldn't move, her dead eyes staring right at me. June 3, 2005. R.I.P. Cousin Johnny. Johnny was Auntie Joanne's boy, and my brother and I used to play with him all the time. Really funny guy. Full of life. After Auntie died though, he changed. Withdrew into himself. Closed off the world. Couldn't handle the anguish, or the bullying, or the abuse, I suppose. I was right outside his room when I heard the shotgun blast. I didn't know it actually did that, you know. Blow a hole right through the head? Figured it was a myth. It isn't. November 10, 2008. R.I.P. Lawrence. Lawrence was my best buddy growing up. We'd do everything together, and I owe so many of my best childhood memories to him. I didn't know, though. I should have. All those bruises and broken bones. Signals, red flags. When he didn't show up for school one day, I went to look for him. I guess I missed him by mere minutes. It was so bloated, you know, his face. Like a big, blue, bulbous, amorphous shape. They later said it was internal bleeding. He always bled on the inside, my friend Lawrence. I heard his father killed himself in jail. His mom drank herself to death. So much grief. Dark and ugly. No real escape. February 10, 2010. R.I.P. Dad. I was sat in the back seat when my dad lost control of the car. It was entirely avoidable, you know. He was going too fast. In a hurry to get to my brother in the hospital. I remember the exact moment I realized he was dead. The car was upside down, I was upside down, and I glanced at my dad, hanging limply from the seat belts. A jagged piece of metal was sticking out of his throat, and there was this steady, hypnotizing stream of blood dripping from the wound. His mouth was moving, like he was trying to speak, but there was no sound. I've since tried to decipher the movement, transcribing his last, inaudible words. Help me. August 10, 2013. R.I.P. Eric. My brother always felt responsible for Dad's death. I guess I blamed him too. We all did. We never told him that, of course, but he could tell. He knew. His drug habit had only gotten worse since Dad passed. You know, heavier stuff. Addictive stuff. Life-crippling stuff. His girlfriend called me that night. She was out of her mind, hysterical, didn't make any sense. Kept yelling incoherently, crying, sobbing. He was ice cold when I found him, needle sticking out of his arm, discolored foam at his mouth. His dead eyes filled with sadness and regret. You can't get away. Death. It's always there. The funeral was heavy shit. Coming from me, that's saying something, because I've attended quite a few. My mom broke down crying repeatedly. My little sister looked deathly pale and way too skinny, and I kept fearing she'd collapse and never wake up again. At one point Tracy, my brother's girlfriend, she's the one that called me that night, drunkenly tumbled to the floor, and the priest had to help her up. It was horrible. Bleak, depressing, utterly devastating shit. I couldn't wait for it to be over. But still I stayed behind. Long after they'd lowered the coffin, I stood there with Tracy. We didn't say anything. There was nothing to be said. No words that could fill the hollow gap between us. No words that could bring him back, to make everything all right, to justify his death. She sat down in the grass, staring down into the gaping hole in the ground. It's quite poetic, you know. Opening a wound in the earth to swallow your loved one. You must be getting pretty fed up with these, huh? A cheery voice called from behind me. I turned to face the owner of the voice, taken aback by the perceived rudeness of the statement, but had to swallow my disdain once I locked eyes with the stranger. He was tall and tan, long blonde hair, sparkling emerald eyes, clad in a white hoodie and basic jeans. He grinned widely, a slight nod when our eyes met. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" I asked. He chuckled heartily. "You sure do," he said. "I'm always around, Logan. Just gotta know how to find me." "You knew Eric too?" I turned my gaze to the chasm in the earth. Maybe it was one of his scumbag dealers or something, coming to claim old debts from Tracy. "We met once or twice," the man said. "Always in passing though, never one for idle conversation. Your brother." I nodded weakly. I'd spent years trying to get through to Eric, but nothing ever seemed to help. He was lost to me, lost to the world, and I just wished I could change it somehow. "You can, you know," the man said cheerily. "Change it. Doesn't have to be this way. Doesn't have to be an endless array of dead loved ones. I mean, it's such a bitch, you know? Can never truly retire that gloomy funeral suit, can you? Always a new one around the corner." I felt a sudden urge to punch him in the face, but I quickly reconsidered. I don't know why, I guess something told me it would be a really bad idea. "What do you want?" I spat aggressively. "My brother just died, and I just want to be left alone." I had to take a step back when he suddenly started laughing. "It's like your subconscious can't handle it, you know. When people don't behave the way they should. The way you're taught they should. Some sort of reptile brain defense mechanism, I suppose." "I don't want anything, Logan," he said coldly. "I'm here to give you what you want." "And what is that?" I asked, edging away from him slowly. Tracy was still on her knees by the grave, and she didn't even seem to register our conversation. "To save your loved ones, of course," he grinned. "Surely you must be getting sick and tired of churches, headstones, and grief-ridden speeches by now. I can take those away." "Well, in a sense anyway." "What do you mean? How?" I turned to face him again, my mind struggling to make sense of the absurdity of his words. "Death is purely coincidental most of the time, Logan." He pointed to Eric's grave. "The butterfly effect and all that jazz. Flip of a coin, heads or tails. Unseen odds and probabilities. It only takes a nudge to change fates, and I'm a really experienced nudger." "What the hell are you talking about?" I yelled, momentarily forgetting where I was. "Who the fuck are you?" He smiled eerily as he placed a hand on my shoulder, his piercing gaze unflinching. "Hey, I get where you're coming from. It's hard to believe. But I can show you, Logan." "Do you want me to show you?" I guess I nodded. I mean, it was involuntary, I'm sure. Just an instinctive reaction to a question I didn't quite understand. But the man obviously saw it as an invitation, because moments later he violently jabbed both his thumbs into my eyes. And I mean into. I could feel them turning to mushy, gooey liquid, the pain so intense that my brain registered it throughout the entirety of my body. I'm certain I screamed. A tormented wail. But I couldn't hear anything. Couldn't feel anything. But I could see. Pay close attention, Logan, the man whispered. I'm only going to show you this once. In my mind, or in his mind, or in some fucked up version of someone's mind, I was shown every death I'd witnessed in my rather short life. Except no one died. No one I loved anyway. Just a nudge. That's all it takes. Someone else slipping on the ice instead of my aunt. My brother refusing that first needle that sent him to the hospital. My grandpa watching in horror as the neighbor tumbles off the roof. The same events, just slightly different. Changing fates. When I came back from the fucked up vision, I was on the ground, eyes all fine and solid, no wounds, gooey liquids, or blood, or anything. The man was still there, harrowing over me imposingly, looking down at me with those unflinching green eyes, a perfect smile resting on his lips. What do you say, Logan? He reached out an arm. Do we have an understanding? I stared at it hesitantly. What exactly are you offering me? I asked, voice all cracked and shivering. Oh, it's quite simple, but I'd love to break it down for you, he said darkly. Tracy dear, come over here. He beckoned for Tracy to come over, and without saying a word she sauntered closer, eyes locked to the ground, movement all slow and jerky. If I didn't know any better, I'd say she wasn't even breathing. That she was a cold, broken, rotting corpse, just like her boyfriend. Just like my brother. 6 deaths, 6 funerals, the man said, placing a hand on Tracy's shoulder. Let's say I give you 6 lives. 666. Has a certain ring to it, wouldn't you say? I don't understand, I murmured quietly. Let's put it this way, whenever someone you love is at odds of dying, I'll nudge them the other way. I'll let your true feelings decide who has to go instead. 6 times. That's the deal. That's more than anyone gets in a lifetime. But how will I know? I looked up at him, tears streaming from my eyes. This makes no sense. Glad you asked? He laughed, gaze shifting over to Tracy. Tracy here will show us 6 deaths that are destined to happen. 6 deaths I'll steer away from the one you love most. He snapped his fingers theatrically, and sat down in the grass next to me. You gotta tune into this, man. It's really something. I still can't revisit that memory without feeling nauseous. Without feeling my stomach churning. It all happened in less than a minute. Less than a second maybe. But it felt so much longer. Some days it feels like I'm still there, watching poor Tracy die 6 times, repeated perpetually. First her body shook violently, like something hit it. Bones protruding through skin, mouth, ears, and eyes bleeding. Next, a knife sticking out of her abdomen. I could see her guts hanging there limply, the blood flowing from the wound ceaselessly. Then a loud bang, like a gunshot, bullet wound instantly appearing in the middle of her forehead, a fountain of crimson spraying from it. A smell of burnt flesh permeated the air as her skin suddenly melted away, the exposed flesh and muscles sizzling horribly. An audible thump then, as the entire right side of her skull was flattened, bones shattering, fluids exploding everywhere. Finally, her body was elevated, neck stretching, neck snapping, eyes popping. Then it was over. An eternity reduced to a second. Tracy fell to the ground. All the wounds, traumas, broken bones, holes, guts, burnt flesh, snapped neck, all the horror, vanished in an instant. She wheezed heavily, slow, guttural breathing, but appeared relatively unharmed given the circumstances. So, do we have an understanding? The man said, grinning widely. We do, I said without hesitation. Marvelous. He got up to his feet and sauntered toward my brother's grave. You're doing the right thing here, Logan. Never doubt that. What about her? I muttered, pointing to Tracy. Will she be okay? Don't mind her, he said. She wants to crawl into the casket with your brother. I'm very intrigued to see if she actually goes through with it. He threw his head back and laughed heartily. I'll see you around, Logan, he said, and then he jumped into the gaping wound in the soil. I checked it before I left. But he wasn't there. Death. Can you escape it? September 2, 2015. My mom didn't die. An elderly driver collapsed behind the wheel, swerving onto the pedestrian walkway. An old lady had dropped her purse right before it happened, and my mom stopped to help her gather her belongings. Had my mom continued walking, she'd be the one crushed by the vehicle, instead of the young teenage girl. Bones protruding from skin, mouth, ears, and eyes bleeding. January 16, 2016. My sister didn't die. They never caught the guy that did it, you know. The back alley stabber. My sister's friend died alone in the darkness. No one heard her screaming. No one heard her crying. She was devastated, my sister. It could have been me, she sobbed in my arms. Apparently her friend was running an errand for my sister. It could have been her. It should have been her. I met Marina, my future wife, randomly on the street after visiting my sister that day. She hit me accidentally, or so she claimed, with a brick, and accompanied me to the hospital to get the stitches done. We talked, kissed and fell in love all in one wonderful, magical day. Life was good. You can escape. March 30, 2017. My mother and wife didn't die. They were out shopping, the three of them. My wife, my sister, and my mom. Wedding dress. They were looking for a wedding dress. I guess the robber was in the wrong place, at the wrong time. Didn't see the cops parked outside. My sister caught a stray bullet from the shootout. Crimson-stained wedding dresses all around. It could have been anyone. But I must have loved her the least. November 21, 2019. My wife didn't die. She was only staying there over the weekend. I had a thing at work, and since she was 7 months pregnant, she didn't want to be alone. My mom said she'd take care of her. That I didn't need to worry. My mom slept on the couch upstairs, while my wife occupied her bed. I guess she didn't hear the smoke detector. I guess I loved my wife more. January 20, 2020. My wife didn't die. She was heavy, you know. Big old tummy. Almost time now, the doctors told us. It was just one of those things. Random accident. Lost her footing going down a flight of stairs. What was she doing down there anyway? Her stomach took a beating. A real brutal beating. It tears me up, you know. But it's the truth. There's no denying it. I loved her more than I loved our unborn child. That tiny little cranium just wasn't built to take a beating. Present day, my wife won't die. She blamed herself. Punished herself. I watched as she spiraled into that black place. Pit of despair. Ceaseless depression. I knew then what I had to do. How I could save her. How I could stop it all. I'll leave her this note, this last confession, so that she will understand. Understand that it's all my fault, not hers. I love you, Marina. This is not on you. This is where it was going all along, wasn't it? A gentle nudge from a very experienced nudger, all the while guiding me to this very moment. I can hear you laughing, you know. I know you're here. But even if I knew all along where it was going, I wouldn't change it. Wouldn't change a thing. Gloomy funeral suit, finely pressed. Check. New set already, solid rope. Check. A long drop, ending in a brutal snap. Check. Death. You can't escape it. But you can embrace it.